Welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a little bit something different today, a little more creative. A while back, my younger brother asked me if I would make him a gavel and wanted to make something special. He's in a motorcycle club, so of course that meant we needed to make the gavel out of motorcycle parts. So I went through my inventory of pistons, picked up a couple of pistons that I thought were, ballpark right size. So I have a pair of 56 millimeter Suzuki pistons. Got a little bit of aluminum round stock. This is an old shock absorber shaft. You can see that the chrome's worn through, but it happens to be exactly the right diameter for the 14 millimeter pin. So we're going to use that. And I had an old ratchet laying around that I've been saving. I cut the end off, but I'd been saving it for a handle. And I thought that's perfect handle for the gavel. So we're going to take that material, probably a little bit of all thread as well to assemble it. And we're going to machine up some parts, and we're going to see if we can't build a gavel. Okay, now I have a couple of pins made up out of that shock shaft material. I scrounged through my junk drawer and just found some miscellaneous 14 millimeter circlips. It's just some odds and ends. They're never going to hold a motor together, but they'll work perfect for this. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and use some Loctite sleeve retainer, and I'm going to glue the wrist pins into the pistons. All right, got a couple of pins, Loctite sleeve retainers on them. Going to give them a little bit of time to cure while we go machine some aluminum for the piece that goes in between and connects the pistons. With these pistons put together back to back or end to end, they're a little bit longer than I really want the anvil to be, so I'm going to shorten up both of them, and then I'm going to go ahead and do a boring operation and machine those pins so they can be joined. We cut 400 thousandths off. I'm going to go ahead and put a quick chamfer on it, and then we're going to do a little boring operation. I've got enough room in here to use quite a bit bigger boring bar, but this one was actually on the tool holder, and none of this is terribly precise, so I'm going to go ahead and just use the little bar, make my cuts. What I'm doing here is I'm going to bore this out up to the shoulder for the wrist pin to 2 inches in diameter, actually 2 inch 3 thousandths. which is the diameter of the slug that I'm going to put in to join the two of them. Looks like we're exactly where we want to be. Now we'll swap out the tools, and we're going to drill a hole through the wrist pin. That's where we're going to thread the other part onto so that we can join the center assembly. So let me switch out some tools, get the tool holder out of the way, and we'll get a centering drill in. We're going to go ahead and drill a hole through the wrist pin that we put in there so that we can drill and tap those. Those of you who know machining will notice that the drill was wandering quite a bit. Looks like the wrist pin hadn't bonded in all the way. I just didn't give it enough time for the sleeve retainer to dry, and the wrist pin rotated after I drilled the pilot hole, so it's a little off center. So we're going to have to knock that out and put a new pin back in it. I got the piston back out of the lathe and got to looking at it, and the hole is perpendicular to the machine skirt, and it's parallel to the bore of the OD of the piston. So I measured it, and it's dead on center. What I didn't account for was the fact that the pin is offset. Most piston pins are offset, and therefore the center of the wrist pin is not in the center of the piston, which is okay. It's not going to be a problem. It's just that I have a little bit thinner wall on one side than I had originally intended for, but it actually worked. It's drilled on center. I'm going to go ahead and tap that so that I can put the threaded rod into it, but it actually didn't actually move. It was just the offset of the wrist pin that was getting picked up in the piston. You can see what I've done now. Trimmed down the skirt here. I've gone in and faced off this area all the way across. I've turned this, and I've also faced off the pin, drilled and tapped a hole in through the middle of the pin. So now what I need to do is take my 2-inch aluminum block, and I'm going to machine it down so that it slips just inside this 2-inch bore. It'll go down against this edge. There'll be a shoulder that drops down till it hits the wrist pin, and then back up, and then I will drill and tap that as well, and put a threaded hole in, put a short piece of all thread in there, and that'll allow me to screw the 2-inch aluminum into the inside of the piston. And then I'm going to cut that off, and I will do the same thing to the other piston. And if I have all my measurements right, the two pistons will screw on, and they will line up as mirror images of each other, and they will make up the head of the gavel. Here are the pistons and the piece to join the two of them in the all thread. You can see I took that 2-inch round stock, I cut it off, machined a shoulder on both sides. Got a nice little jaw mark in here when I was parting the tool off. The parting tool jammed and tried to chuck it off the lathe, but fortunately just a little minor cosmetic on the outside of it, but it all machined out okay. So I've got an index on that side, index on this side. I have a piece of all thread cut. This gavel is going to go to my younger brother, who is in a motorcycle club, who rides American bikes. So of course I had to use an American thread and not the normal metric thread that I would use around here, but got a 5/16 coarse thread. And then you can see what we did here in the pistons is there's our counter bore. So the inside of the piston was machined to match the outside of this, and this was turned out right here to match the diameter of that index. And you can see that this is threaded. Remember earlier in the video I thought I had a pin that moved, and it turns out there's enough offset in the wrist pin that I was getting off to one side of it, but I was able to pick it up and drill it out. So the way this is going to work is the all thread screws into here. And then each one of the pistons threads on. Here and here. So I knew I was going to be pretty close, but you know, there's a certain amount of slop in the threads that I cut. All threads not all that accurate, so I calculated things out, but I left myself, you can see that I left a little bit of material here on one side, because what I wanted to do is be able to tighten them down, find out where they were. Now I'm going to take them down, I'll measure this, I'll take them down the amount that I need to rotate these back around so that they line up, because ultimately I need them to line up like this so that I have room to put my handle in, and then we will have the gavel. So a little bit more machine work. I'll take these back over to the lathe, do that final machine work, and then we'll get it ready to make a handle. Took a few thousandths off of the sleeve in between the two pistons, and now they tighten down where I want them. And yes, I'm anal enough to make sure that both of the circlip grooves were going in the same direction. And I wanted these lined up. So I have this ratchet handle that I've had floating around for a long time. The ratchet went bad and I just cut the head off. Figured I'd use it for a handle somewhere, so I'm going to turn this down so that I can thread it into the head and we'll have a mount. Here's our handle, all machined up. You can see that I just squared up the end, took the sharp edge off, counterbored it, drilled and tapped it. We're going to use this grade 8 set screw. It's going to thread into here. Now we're going to make a special washer on the milling machine that'll go between the curve of the piston and the handle, and we'll go ahead and drill and tap the piston assembly, or the head assembly, put the washer in and see what it looks like. I want the washer to go between the handle and the outside edge of the pistons, just so it gives it a little bit more support when you're pounding on it. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and put a piece of 1-inch aluminum solid stock into the chuck. I've set the boring bar at 56 millimeters, which is the outside diameter of the two pistons. So what I'm going to do is make a couple of cuts through here, and I'm going to get a curve in this top edge. Then I'll flip it over to the lathe, bore a hole in it and part it off, and that'll give me my washer that's flat on one side but curved on the other so it matches the piston. There we go. We've got a nice curved surface. It's going to match the piston. Now let's take it out and put it in the back in the lathe. Last machining operation we need to do is go ahead and drill the piston assembly so that we can screw the handle assembly into it. So we're going to go ahead and do that in the milling machine. Run a tap through there and we are good to go.
So you just used bug spray in your home.
Okay, this is the last piece of the puzzle. We'll go ahead and assemble the handle on now. I don't know how well it shows up in the video, but I've gone ahead and run a tap through that hole. I did machine a few threads off of the set screw. A tap won't thread all the way to the bottom of the hole, and I want this to go all the way down against the block, so I turned a few threads off the end. That way it'll jam down against the end. So we'll put that on first, and of course, now that we're done, we have a margarita ready for us to go. So machine work's all done. No drinking while we're running the heavy machinery, but now it's assembly time. A couple sips of margarita and we'll button this up.
More than 3,800 slots for round-the-clock fun. Over 50 table games for however you roll. And the best in classic and electronic bingo around. 3 casinos, limitless fun. When all you want is everything.
With the sun shining brightly, does it look like your home needs a fresh clean up? It's 965 Jack F. Bensley Callahan here. Do what I did and contact Certa Pro Painters for your home or business. I am still impressed with how clean and professional they were at the Callahans. And they're true craftspeople. Each Certa Pro Painter's business is independently owned and operated. You're going to love the job they get completed for you. Schedule your free estimate at CertaPro.com. That's Certa with a C.
When you drive the most dependable mass market brand, you can stop thinking about what you can't do and start doing what you never thought possible. Visit your local Kia dealer today to see yourself behind the wheel of the #1 most dependable mass market brand 3 years in a row by J.D. Power. Kia, movement that inspires. Call 800-634 Kia for details. Always drive safely. Kia received the fierce superior promise among mass market brands in the J.D. Power 2021 to 2023 U.S. Vehicle Dependability Studies. 2023 study based on 2020 models. See jdpower.com/awards for 2023 details.
Every business seeks an advantage, whether it's having the best location, hiring top talent, or spotting trends.
There she is,
They happen. And now,
the Piston Gavel.
service will give your business a new advantage. Introducing
Hope he gets good use out of it. I'm going to have to put it in the mail and get it off to him. Anyway, that was what I spent 10 hours today building in my garage. I like doing this kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. However, the video takes half the time to video it, edit it, all that kind of stuff. So appreciate it. If you like the content and you enjoy watching this, will you please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.